The two of them look at the places that have been flooded and the power of running water. Fentanyl, the one drug, killed over 100,000 people in this country last year, and no telling how many more that we don't know about. And what is the number one drug that's the most accessible, the most promoted? Alcohol. And it killed and destroyed more people than all the other drugs. Fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, marijuana, meth, all of those put together worldwide. Alcohol did more than all those put together. Oh, I tell you all are on it this morning. Drugs, water. What else? We hadn't got down to the one. Sin. But this is a precursor. There's something that's a precursor of sin in most cases. That is the ultimate destruction. But what about the tongue? James, in his very practical letter, tells us about the power of the human tongue and what it is able to do and what we're not seemingly able to do with it. Do any of you have a problem with your tongue? You do? One honest person in this whole crowd. The rest of us need to be on the front bench tonight when they ask if you've said or done something. That would be the more reasonable question. I'm telling you what, the tongue in gossip, in slander, in rumor, in falsehood, in all the ways that we use it. Listen to what James says about it. And don't be sitting there thinking, yeah, old so-and-so over there, he's got a tongue that's a foot long and loose at both ends. He needs to be, or she needs to be listening to this. Brother, I'm going to tell you something. This is something that all of us need to be paying heed to. Because James says the power of the tongue, the ability to ruin and destroy and corrupt. Because the things that come out of the mouth, off the tongue, come from out of the heart. My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships, although they are large and are driven by fierce winds. They are turned by a very small rudder wherever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. You know, on the West Coast in California and in the other areas out there where they've had droughts and it's very dry and they've done a lot of stupid stuff like not cleaning the underbrush under it because some genius said that they just need to let nature take its course, and it's made it 1,000 times harder to be able to control forest fires out there because they feel like a little kindle underneath the trees will help put it out, I guess. But anyway, the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind. Go sometime to SeaWorld and you see those whales, the huge sea creatures that they treat them, it's like a circus act. They've been tamed. In fact, some of them to the point that they can't be put in the wild anymore because they can't take care of themselves. They've become tamed just like a house cat. But he says, no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Thus no spring yields both salt water and fresh. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but it is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. When I was thinking about the tongue and this lesson this morning, you remember when Jesus had told Peter that before the cock crowed he would deny him 3 times? And when the maiden asked Peter, you were part of that group, weren't you? And what was it that betrayed Peter, that she knew he was part of the disciples of Jesus? It's what? He said, your speech betrays you. I can tell where you're from. You're one of those Galileans. Your speech betrays you. And there is so much. And if we'd have quit about 20 minutes ago, we could have talked about a bunch of these things this morning, but we needed to do that too. I hope you're not in a hurry this morning. His speech betrayed him. And just ask and answer for yourself. How many times during the course of a week does our speech betray us? That something we say or something we tell or words and language that we use are in a number of different ways. Something we say about somebody, that our speech betrays us.
We don't think before we say something, and we let our emotions guide us on that. When I get angry, I say things
Well, what is the cure for that? Don't get angry. Don't let your emotions overpower your brain so that your tongue is just free to do whatever it's liable to do or say whatever it's liable to say. And brethren, we've all either experienced it personally or we've seen somebody else that when they got mad and upset, I mean, words would come out of their mouth that would take the hide right off of a goat. I mean, it's amazing the things that we say when we allow emotion to take control of our actions. That's how people kill other people. That's how things that are personal and should never be spoken of get broadcast to the public. I'd like to show you, I'd like to demonstrate with this book the power and the destructiveness of the tongue. I was looking in 4 things that the scripture, there's a lot more, that gossip, that's condemned by Solomon in Proverbs, and it's condemned all through the gospel. Paul warns us against being gossipers and slander. Slander is actually different from gossip. How would you define slander? When you say that that person was slandered, you know, slander is what puts you in court for defamation of character. What is slander? Is it when we say something derogatory and destructive against the person or the character of somebody, and we do it with an intent to hurt their reputation, their name, their position, whatever? Gossip is just telling things that we've heard that may or may not be true. And that last part of it's the real important, that may not be true. And then there's boasting. Do you know that the Bible condemns boasting? And why? Why would that be a sin of the tongue? Boasting. And what is boasting? Well, most of the time, and maybe all the time, it's expanding on whatever we're telling. You know, a fish grows from weighing a pound to maybe weighing 5 pounds. Everything is bigger and better when we tell it. It outdoes anything anybody else has got. And so it becomes a second cousin to just lying. When we tell that which is not so, it's a falsehood. It's untrue. And so God's word also condemns that. And then coarse conversation, Paul condemns in Ephesians. He talks about speaking with our speech being seasoned with grace. Is that the way we talk? Our speech being seasoned with grace, with goodness and kindness and love and affection and forgiveness, that it's filled with expressions of that. Coarse speech. I think we know what that is. That's something we tell at work that we wouldn't tell in Bible class this morning. It's coarse speech. And I'd like to, in the rest of the time, I'd like for you to just take a Bible trip with me. Look over in 1 Samuel chapter 18. I want you to see and to really absorb what your tongue and mine can do to other people and how destructive it can be, and why James said that it's set on the fires of hell itself, because it is so detrimental to us and to others. 1 Samuel chapter 18. And let me tell you just a little bit about the context of this chapter here. Saul has been anointed as the first king of Israel. He's done a pretty good job so far. He has met David when the army of Israel was fighting against the Philistines. Scott mentioned it this morning about David and Goliath. David was just a young shepherd boy, probably about 16 years old when that event happened. In fact, his father had sent him to visit his brothers Eliab and Shema that were fighting with Saul's army. And he brought them some things, some food and provisions from home. And when David got there, the battle was just getting ready to take place. The army of Israel was on one side and the army of the Philistines on the other. But this was a different kind of a war and a different kind of battle, because every day for 40 days, the Philistines had sent out a champion, a giant by the name of Goliath, who was probably between 8.5 feet and 9 feet tall. I was watching the basketball games yesterday, and Purdue has got a guy that stood flat-footed on the floor, and he just tiptoed a little bit, and he dunked. His arms were long enough. He dunked the basketball, and they named him the player of the year, and he can barely run down the floor. And the thing that he does is just reach up there. His arms are so long, and Goliath was about 1.5 feet, or maybe 2 foot taller than that player was. And he probably weighed about twice as much, because, I mean, he was a mountain of a man. And he'd come out every day and he'd say, "Send out your champion. Let me fight him. If he defeats me, we will become your slaves, your servants. But if I defeat him, you will become our slaves and our servants." Now, nobody from the army of Israel would go. And don't think it was because they were afraid that they were going to get killed. I mean, any of the other Philistines could have killed them just as well as Goliath. That was, when you went into battle, that was often the outcome, that you would be killed. But the problem was what? It was the consequences of being killed. Because they knew if they were killed, and in all likelihood they were going to be, that then all their brothers and their uncles and their friends that were fighting in the battle were going to become slaves because of their failure. I'll tell you, the fear of failure paralyzes us. It just paralyzes us. And anyway, we know the rest of that story. David said, "The battle is the Lord's." And so he goes out and he slays him. Then he comes then to know Saul, and he's the one that plays the harp and sings, because Saul is got a sleeping problem. He's unable to sleep. He has night terrors. And so David is promoted on and on, but Saul didn't really realize who he was. But in chapter 18, David in the previous chapter has been out in battle, and he's won a great victory. And he said, verse 57 of chapter 17, then as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? So David answered, I am the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite. Now when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Now, I don't know if you have seen any of the debates from people that are trying to defend and promote and to legitimize the sin of homosexuality. But invariably, they use that passage of Scripture right there, that there was a immoral relationship then between Jonathan and David. Because David will later say that he loved Jonathan more than he did even his wives. They had a bond of friendship all the way from the time that they met. In fact, Jonathan gave up his right to be the king, the next king of Israel for David, because Jonathan understood there was something special about David. And then Saul took him that day and would not let him go home to his father's house anymore. All right, go on down to verse 5. So David went out wherever Saul sent him and behaved wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So he's becoming a chief man in Saul's house, still a very young man. Now, here's where we get to the point that's something that happens in our lives practically every day. David went out, and it happened as they were coming home, when David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women had come out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. Now, have you ever heard that expression, foolish and idle talk? Well, sometimes it's not just talked, it's sung. Listen to what they're singing. So the women sang as they danced and said, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. Was that true? Well, Saul had certainly slain his thousands, but at this time, David certainly had not slain his 10,000s, not personally for sure. So what they were singing was a song, something that somebody had made up or speculated on, or what do we call it? It was enhanced. It was an enhanced conversation. And it was one of those truths that hadn't happened yet, because later on David was a man of blood. That's why God would not allow him to build the temple. He said it would bring reproach upon it. And so they're singing the song that doesn't have truth in it. But guess what? Saul heard it. Then Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him, and he said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom? And look at verse 10. So Saul eyed David from that day forward. His whole attitude from that moment forward changed toward David. Why? Because some idle tongues were singing a foolish song that itself was not true. But to Saul, it was just as true as if it were true. Have you seen that happen to people? Maybe we get a diagnosis from a doctor. One of the best friends I've got in the world yesterday told me that he'd got a test back that was positive for cancer. And he said, I'm not, he said, many of these tests come back, they're false. They give the wrong diagnosis. And I know that because I guess about a year ago, when they're trying to figure out what was wrong with me, besides being old and worn out, and they were running all these tests on me. One of them, I was having some problems with my stomach, and so they x-rayed my stomach, and it also showed a lobe in my lung on the left side. And they were looking for something in my stomach. They said, we found something in your lung. You've got a mass in the lower part of your lung. And the doctor told me, he said, it's probably nothing. It may have been a shadow. That you have all kinds of things like that. And he said, we're going to have you to have is it a PET scan? No, this is a PET scan, because they had to give me a chemical and all that. And it reacts, I guess, to cancer, because it did. I got it back. I wasn't expecting. I told him, I said, I'm not feeling anything. I'm not feeling bad or anything. Well, that test came back, and 3 doctors looked at it, and they said, you've got lung cancer. Well, that sure will make your day. But, sometimes when you're not confident with your medical opinions, you go to people that know, which in my case was my sister, because she knows everything. And but we got to researching. I couldn't think of anybody in my family that had cancer. None of my daddy's brothers, sisters died with cancer. I didn't know of anybody that had. She had been doing a lot of research and everything, family tree and all that stuff, and didn't find anybody either. And I told the doctor, I said, if you're looking for blood pressure and diabetes and stuff like that, our family's the one to come to. But cancer, well, they decided then, they did some more tests, and they decided to do a biopsy and puncture that place and get something to do a biopsy with. And anyway, just as a precaution, they put me on antibiotics. And when they x-rayed it again, or did whatever they did to it, it had shrunk. They said, whoop, that means that it's not cancer, because that antibiotics are not going to have any impact. And then they went back another time, they did it, and it was gone. And it made me think of a friend of mine that went to the doctor and got a diagnosis just like I did, and went home and took a pistol and took his life. things that we hear that impact us directly have a tremendous impact on us to the extent that we will allow it and take over and possess us. Saul became obsessed with what these women were singing. And look what it did to him. It's going to destroy him as the king of Israel. He's going to try a couple of times to kill David. It changes his whole attitude toward those around him, because he thinks his own son, he cast his own son Jonathan out because he said, you're a traitor. You're going to allow your inheritance to go to a stranger. And it just ruined his life. The tongue. The tongue. And here's one that is also in Samuel, but it's in 2 Samuel. And I'll be honest with you, I had even forgotten about this incident, because it's also one of terrible consequences. This is in 2 Samuel, and it's, let's see here. This is in the section where when David gets older, that he begins to remember those that have showed kindness and done good things and helped him. And this is the where he remembers Jonathan, his great friend, and he wants to do something good for the household of Jonathan. He does that for Jonathan's son Mephibosheth. But this is in chapter 10. It happened after this that the king of the people of Ammon died, and Hanun, his son, reigned in his place. All right. This is Mephibosheth, is over in chapter 9. In this one, David said, I will show kindness to Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness to me. So David sent by the hand. Now, what is David's intent here? What was his intention when he made this statement? I think it was just exactly what he said. His father was kind to me and showed me a kindness. I want to do something good for him, to help him in recompense for what he did for me. I remember many years ago, there was a young girl that came in when my office was up on Interstate Drive, right beside old Charlie's there. And she was in some kind of, I don't know whether it's a beauty contest or something else, something like that, where you have to get somebody to sponsor you. And she came in, and I usually didn't do that. But when she told me whose granddaughter who she was, and I said, is your grandfather so-and-so? She said, yes. And I'll tell you, just in my mind, flashed back when I was in high school playing basketball one year, and he was a coach, and the kind things that both he and his wife did for me to encourage me, I told her, I said, yes, I'll be glad to. And I said, I'm doing it in honor of your grandfather. David was doing this, he's doing it in honor of this man's father. And everybody's intentions, nothing hidden or nothing devious about it. And so I will show kindness to the Hanun the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness to me. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. David is trying to practice that right here. But what happens? He sends his servants, and they came to the land of the people of Ammon, and the princes of the people of Ammon, who was it? The princes, other people in authority, said to Hanun their lord, do you think that David really honors your father because he sent comforters to you? What the Bible says, don't let your good be evil spoken of. Do you think that he really is sincere in this? I mean, they call David's act here, has David not rather sent his servants to you to search the city, to spy it out, and to overthrow it? You know, I hope that this doesn't remind anybody in this room of times in our life when we have reacted the same exact way. Somebody is trying to do us a kindness, and we've done just like they did. Look at the results of this. These people talked the king into a bad decision. Therefore, Hanun took David's servants, shaved off half their beards, cut off their garments in the middle at their buttocks, and sent them away. In other words, he shamed, embarrassed, and humiliated these messengers that David had sent. When they told David, he sent to meet them because the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, wait at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return. I mean, it was so embarrassing. Because, can you imagine, some of you men that have got beards, if you just shaved half of it off and half your face was clean shaven, half of it had a beard on, everybody that saw you you'd be a spectacle. It would be a total embarrassment to you. And what they did to their clothes was even worse. And they did all of this to not only humiliate them, but to tell David how little they thought of what he did. And so in verse 6, when the people of Ammon saw that they had made themselves repulsive to David, the people of Ammon sent and hired the Syrians, and on and on. We're going to run out of time. I want you to see the conclusion of it. You have to look over to the verse 17. When it was told David, he gathered all Israel, crossed over the Jordan, and came to Helam, and the Syrians set themselves in battle array against David, and he fought with them. Then the Syrians fled before Israel, and David killed 700 charioteers and 40,000. Did you hear that, brethren? 40,000 horsemen of the Syrians. And I don't know how many thousands of others. Why did this happen? David did not make any move to go with war against them. Look what he did when he said, I want to do something for the house of Jonathan, for Jonathan's sake. And he made Mephibosheth, who was a beggar laying by the side of the road that was lame in both feet, he made him a millionaire. He gave him all of Saul's lands. He had Mephibosheth to eat at his table, David's table, the king's table, for the rest of his life. And he made the servants of one of his chief men to take care of all the houses, lands, and everything of Mephibosheth, because he was lame and he was unable. And here the windup is 40,000 horsemen, 700 charioteers, and no telling of how many other people died, because the king's princes, his people that he depended on for advice, told him David is going to do something bad, something evil. He's looking to invade your kingdom. Brethren, we'll have to stop there, but we'll finish this up next week, the Lord willing.